Manufactured locally for the Carolinas. Lockdown! This is the Rob Brown Show. Get robbed! Only on
The Fan Upstate.
Right after some obvious technical difficulties, the Rob Brown Show back on your radio. It is the Fan Upstate. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back up and running on the air. We are back up and running on the stream. We did have to disconnect to kind of reset everything. Software, computers, platform streamings, webcams, the entire internet as a whole. Somebody get Al Gore on the phone. We need help, all right? But I think we're good. I think we got it.
Did anyone in the building throw anything afterwards?
No, but it was there's 6 shows happening around me right now, and you could tell the difference, great one. You could tell the difference between the host and the techies. Because about 3 people just stood up and threw their chairs back real quick, all at the exact same time. Like the internet to the entire building went out. So we have switched over to our own internet source at this point. But yeah, like you can tell the difference between the people who work with the tech and the people who just talk about football as a job, because the panic went to about a 13 real fast here in this building. But fortunately, for all of you out there across the upstate of South Carolina, your boy's not just good at the X's and the O's.
Don't you jinx this.
Your boy's good at the ones and the O's too. That's binary. That's computer stuff. All right. I've one-man banded out here. Figured it out. We're good to go. We're ready to roll. Let's get to our number 2, ladies and gentlemen, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. A very special edition of the Rob Brown Show presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings, our incredible corporate partners and sponsors who helped get us here. It is day numero dos of ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are glad to be here. We're going to be, throughout the rest of the day, getting a bunch of sound from Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, which unfortunately we got cut off from in that last segment. So I'll run you back a couple of the highlight points from Jim Phillips. We'll hear from Rhett Lashley, the head coach of SMU. He had a couple of statements that raised the hairs on the back of the neck of SEC fans. We're going to get to that coming up a little bit later on in the show. We are going to continue our preview of the teams across the ACC and the role within the conference and the impact they may have on the odds-on betting favorites to win the conference, the Clemson Tigers, headed into the season, including the 6 teams that are on tap today: Florida State, Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest. We will get to all of those schools throughout the day. We will hear more from Miami, SMU, Stanford, Cal, and Virginia, who spoke yesterday, including former Clemson offensive coordinator, now Virginia Cavalier head coach Tony Elliott, and more over the next 3 hours of the radio broadcast. But it is 7:01 in the morning. You have less than 58 minutes until you've got to get your behind to work. Sit down in that chair, respond to all those passive-aggressive emails that you've been putting off for like 2 days because you're just dialed in on college football. And let's be honest, who can blame you? But you are going to have to go to work at some point, and when you do, you're going to start talking sports. And when you do start talking sports, you got to know what's going on. And since you got to know what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome for this.
Are you ready for the playbook of the peculiar, the almanac of the absurd, and the encyclopedia of the extraordinary? Well, you better be, because we're diving headfirst into the 3 top stories that will have your coworkers saying, "Burn it down! Burn it down!" Take their first bathroom break.
No.
Here we go. Welcome to the Water Cooler Cheat Sheet on the Fan Upstate.
It is indeed the Water Cooler Cheat Sheet, the top 3 sports stories that you need to know before you get to the office and start talking sports this AM with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your dog, whoever you spend your workday with. When you do, this is what you will be talking about. Let us dive right in, ladies and gentlemen, to item number 1. We have been keeping an eye, paying attention on the potential expansion of the college football playoffs. It is currently set at 12 teams. It is going to go to 16 teams, as I have been pointing out for a long time now. The reality is that there is just too much money left on the table if they do not switch. I understand Tony Petitti trying to use his conference signing off on the college football expansion as a bargaining chip to get the format that he wants. I also understand Greg Sankey, commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, effectively saying we got to do what's best for everybody. We want the 5+11, and you know, if we need to stand pat, we will. It is just classical negotiating tactics from both of those two commissioners. Well, we had two commissioners speak out yesterday. One of them was Tony Petitti, who yesterday at Big Ten Media Days, day number 1, continued to advocate for a future college football playoff format that leans on multiple automatic qualifiers to different conferences. Speaking at the start of Big Ten Media Days yesterday, Petitti said a 16-team format with 4 AQ spots for the Big Ten, 4 AQ spots for the SEC, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, 1 for the highest rated group of 6 team, and 3 at-large bids, in his belief, would, quote, better connect the regular season with the postseason, end quote. He also went on to say that the model proposed by Greg Sankey in the Southeastern Conference, which includes automatic spots for only the 5 highest rated conference champions and would include 11 at-large berths, determined by a selection committee, would, quote, have a difficult time gaining support from the Big Ten. Obviously, those two conferences are the two power players. It is ultimately up to them. Now, there are bargaining chips on the table, and this is certainly perhaps as it is one of the few times that the SEC and the Big Ten have not been in lockstep with each other. This maybe is an opportunity for some of those other conferences, the ACC, the Big 12, the Group of 6 conferences. Maybe they can throw their leverage around. Hey, Greg Sankey, we would be willing to help you push for the 5+11 if you give us X. Hey, Tony Petitti, we would be happy to push for the 4-4-2-2-1-3 if you give us X. I don't know. Yesterday, however, here at ACC Media Days, Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the conference, was asked, where are you at? Where's the ACC at? What model do they want to follow once we get to the 16-team playoff? And here is how Jim Phillips answered that question.
Yeah, I've always believed in rewarding conference champions. And if you're in a really good conference, I think like we have across the P4, and you're also part of the G6, conference championships matter. And that's been consistent in my 5 years, that they should be rewarded. Fairness and access should also be part of the equation. And so we have a really good playoff right now. It's the 5-7 model. I'm open to 5-9 and 5-11. I always look to our championships to try to have as much access as possible within reason. It has to make sense. I think 5-7 allows about 9% of those that play college football at the FBS level a chance to get into the playoff. And it goes up about 1.5%. So I think you get to nearly 12% if you go to a 5-11 model. I know that there's questions about selection and selection committee. I have great faith and confidence in those committee members. I've served on the men's basketball selection, women's basketball selection committees. I know how difficult that is. These are honorable, honest individuals with great integrity. I do like that we're reviewing the protocol for selection, and I think that will help. But I want to stay committed to access and fairness to all of college football, not only the ACC, and protect our AQ. So I look forward to our ongoing conversations, and I understand why other leagues feel differently about positioning of the future format. So look forward to some of those ongoing conversations.
So there was Commissioner Jim Phillips, who did tout the openness and fairness of the 5+11 model, but was unwilling to commit the conference to either model in this moment in time, which again makes sense. I think if you are the ACC or the Big 12, really any a conference that's not the Big 10 or the SEC, I think it is beneficial to be looking for spots where the SEC and the Big Ten disagree with each other. I think you are looking for spots where those two conferences are not lockstep, and then you have the opportunity, even if it is not necessarily a plan, structure, format, whatever we're talking about, that you particularly want in that moment. If you can find a way, anytime those two conferences are butting heads, to say, we will throw our support behind you, Tony Petitti or Greg Sankey, and in return, we would like this concession or this benefit or this much money or whatever, that's likely going to be the strategy. So we'll see if anything develops out of that moving forward. But we've got to move on to item number 2. It's just, just as a Braves fan, you can't have nice things. That's all it comes down to. The Braves have a fantastic offensive outing in game number 1 against the San Francisco Giants, a team that had lost 6 games in a row after Atlanta beat them squarely in game number 1. What the Bravos do last night, they turn around and got shut out 9-0. Dyson Daniel came in for a start, took his first L on the season. 5 innings pitched, gave up 7 hits, 5 runs, all earned, struck out 3 in his performance before he gave way to the rest of the bullpen, which opened up with Wander Suero, who came in 2 innings, 3 hits, 4 runs, all earned, did get 2 Ks, gave up a dong in the process. Over on the other side for the Atlanta Braves, they were able to get 8 hits up on the board last night, 4 of them against the Giants starting pitcher. Here is the problem. The Atlanta Braves had 10 at-bats with the runner in scoring position. They went 0-for-10 in those 10 at-bats. Jurickson Profar had a double. Nobody else put up a multi-base hit last night. I don't know what to tell you. You go 0-for-10, including Ronald Acuna Jr. going 0-for-3 with runners in scoring position. You're going to have a hard time winning the baseball game. The Braves fall to 44-56, back to a dozen games below 500. They are now 1 game over 500 at home at 26-25, and Atlanta is now a full 3 games behind the Miami Marlins in the NL East. They are now 13.5 games back of the Philadelphia Phillies, who lead the NL East, and the Phillies are a half game up on the New York Mets. So that's where we stand with the Atlanta Braves. Let us get to item number 3. A couple of different places that I could have gone with this one. I didn't really know where we needed to end up. There are some little stories here and there, some little stories scattered around the sport-osphere, but we are at ACC Media Days. So let's focus in on that conference. I thought that this conversation that took place yesterday with Jim Phillips was very interesting. And I'm going to go back. It is kind of connected to item number 1 and kind of not. We were talking about conference expansion. There's a lot of other obvious decisions that have to be made across the landscape of college football moving forward. And one of the things that was I thought a very interesting and unique question that was presented to Jim Phillips during his Q&A yesterday, and I thought it was a fantastic question, was, would the ACC be comfortable? Would it be practical to utilize their power in basketball to throw around to try to impact what happens in the world of football? Would the ACC be willing to use the brand power that they have had in the last few years with North Carolina, with Duke, with Miami, with Stanford, with some of these good teams in the Wake Forest, some of these good basketball teams over the last couple of years, and the weight that they carry in that world? Would they be willing to use that to try to impact the conversations going on around football? And I thought Jim Phillips gave a somewhat interesting answer.
Basketball is the crown jewel of all of our championships, I think. CFP certainly is really important and draws an awful lot, ends up being a financial engine for all of us. But I think the country really enjoys March like nothing else. So we have a responsibility and obligation to protect it. It's in a really good spot right now. It's 68. We've had the iterations from 48, 64 to 68. I like what we're doing, Luke, as it relates to looking at it, reviewing it, talking to coaches, talking to student athletes. Logistically, it has to make sense. The compression of when tournaments finish, and then when you have the Masters, which obviously with a partner like CBS, you're not going to change that. Only allows you a certain amount of time to get these games in. So you can't hastily expand the tournament if you haven't looked at that and player safety and number of games and what it would mean for travel and how you would work those additional 4 or 8. But as I said earlier, I always like additional access for teams and for schools when it's the right time and when it's the right tournament and format. So we'll look at it.
So there's Jim Phillips, and I thought that the answer was interesting because the question was, would you guys be able to utilize your weight in the basketball world to try to maybe have some sort of impact in the football world? And Jim Phillips made the answer exclusively about basketball in that spot, which I thought was kind of interesting, to tell you the truth. I thought it was kind of an interesting thought to divert it, just go about basketball. And obviously, there's been the conversation about the conference basketball tournament expanding too. So I don't know if that was just maybe a crossing of the wires, or if Jim Phillips just wanted to say, look, I'm not putting that on the table, right? Like, I'm not taking it off the table, but I'm not putting it on the table either. The point of all that I have said here about this and about the conversation we had with item number 1 is very simply that the ACC, the Big 12 specifically, the rest of the group of 6 as well, have got to be, as of right now, they have got to be looking around and trying to find spots for leverage anywhere that they can. They have got to be looking around to find spots where they can kind of pull some of the chips, some of the gold that is currently being hoarded by the Big 10 and the SEC. Understandably, it's their job. Try to reach across the table and start grabbing some back for themselves and finding any place where they have any leverage to do just that. And I wonder if maybe down the road that does become a part of that conversation. We will keep an eye on that coming up later on in the Rob Brown Show. I've got plenty more audio from Jim Phillips. I've also got some audio from Rhett Lashley, the head coach at SMU. Some audio from Mario Cristobal at Miami, all from yesterday. And we'll get you set up for day 2 of SEC Media Days with FSU, Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest, all slated to take to the podium today. So when we come back here in just a minute, let's hear a little bit more audio from Jim Phillips and his commissioners forum yesterday. In the final segment of this hour, we will take a look at, we've talked Florida State. We'll take a look at 2 other teams on the docket today, specifically 2 other teams that I think will directly impact the Clemson Tigers this year. They are Louisville and Georgia Tech. Both have heads-up games. Both of those teams are trending upwards. Both of those teams could be power players in this league in the next few years. I'd like to break them down team by team later on in the show. I am Rob Brown, the great Alonzo back in the studio. The Rob Brown Show is on your radio. This is the Fan Upstate.
Media Days. What can we do?
Off in Charlotte and a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
On the Fan Upstate.
The Rob Brown Show live from ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. Thanks to our friends and corporate sponsor at Ingles for helping us get here. And go BTS. Behind the scenes is what that means. Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, took some time yesterday, about 57 minutes behind the podium, to give some thoughts on the status of the ACC, the direction of the ACC, what is happening within the ACC. There were a couple of spots within the Commissioners Forum that I thought were very interesting because, again, the commissioner's job, as we have mentioned, and I don't care which commissioner you're talking about, the commissioner's job is very simple. It's to do whatever he can do to get as much as he can get for the conference. And obviously, it's PR, public relations. His job is to go out there and make the conference look as good as the conference can look. For instance, yesterday, Jim Phillips spent quite a bit of time talking about the amount of television time that the ACC will receive this year.
And what makes our league great is the exceptional talent. The ACC once again stands out as the conference of quarterbacks, and the numbers speak for themselves. This year's group is as deep and talented as we've seen in years, with elite signal callers, many here with us this week. But it's not just about quarterbacks. This league is loaded with explosive playmakers on offense, game changers on defense, and we all know the value of special teams in this league. There's not enough time to outline all the meaningful games and rivalries that will take place this season. However, there's no question all eyes will once again be on this conference. During week one, we're the only league to compete across 5 days, Thursday through Monday. And we will once again anchor Labor Day weekend on Monday night with North Carolina playing host to TCU. Our teams will also play nation-leading 7 Power 4 opponents in week one, all of which who have won at least 9 games this past season. Throughout the regular season, ACC football is set to dominate Friday nights. A league record and nation-leading 12 games are scheduled and will feature 12 of our 17 programs. Fans will never miss a minute of action as our ESPN, ACC network, and CW partners will once again cover our teams throughout the entire season. Starting next week, ACCN will embark on a 3-week road trip previewing all 17 ACC programs with 60-minute shows that air in primetime each weekday. As I said before, being one of only 3 conferences with its own network is a differentiator. And in this case, Road Trip is unique to the ACC, as it's the only college conference network to have this preseason programming.
So, Lonzo, you got a look on your face. Is it in response to Jim Phillips there?
It is the conference of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Just like, it's like, okay, after that, I don't care what you say. Because that just, yeah, I mean.
I think 2 years ago, maybe you could even argue last year, that I think there would have been an argument there. But I think after the time that we spent last week at SEC Media Days and talking about, I'm with you. Like, as much as and I'm going to hype the ACC to the best of my ability, even though I spent multiple weeks before we got here saying I think it's a down year and I think it's going to be a disappointing year for the conference. We'll find out. I hope I'm wrong. If everybody reaches silver lining status, then sure, maybe we got a lot to talk about at the end of the year. But there are some good quarterbacks in this conference. To say it's the conference quarterbacks, it's just not. The Southeastern Conference this year is loaded with front end talent. I'm not saying they're all going to work out. Maybe it's a disappointing year over there. I don't know. That's the great part about football.
It's a conference of a quarterback. Cade, I mean, that's about it, right?
And again, I think it's fair to. I think it's Haynes King at Georgia Tech. I think is a stellar quarterback. I think he will be amongst the top 5-10 quarterbacks in the country this year. Thomas Castellanos coming down to Florida State with Gus Malzahn and not at Boston College, which was kind of a more traditional pro style with more of a dual threat offensive coordinator in Gus Malzahn. Maybe Thomas Castellanos is in that group. Carson Beck at Georgia. Carson Beck left Georgia with a 24-3 record. Remember, Carson Beck got Georgia to the SEC championship game last year. It was in the SEC championship game that he got banged up and he got hurt, and it cost him the rest of the postseason. Is the postseason fate of the Georgia Bulldogs different last year if Carson Beck's available in the playoffs? Maybe we got a Georgia-Ohio State title game. I don't know. I think it's fair to ask that question. Kevin Jennings at SMU, I think, is going to be a top 5 quarterback this year. That kid is an absolute stud this year. There are good quarterbacks in this conference, but I think the Southeastern Conference kind of took that moniker from them at least this year. We'll find out. We're less than a month away at this point from Week 0 football kicking off. Now, as far as the TV stuff goes, I don't have a problem with Jim Phillips hyping that, because if you are the ACC, you got to lean on everything that you can lean on as a reason that you are worth paying attention to. And he is correct. Even if the ACC network is a distant third place to the SEC net and a distant third place to the Big Ten network, you have a network. It is exclusive. If you earn a new fan somehow, some way, they have a place that they can go as the schools grow within this conference. Teams like SMU, Cal, Stanford, all teams that feel like they are on the rise as classic powerhouses like Syracuse. If Fran Brown is the guy and Syracuse starts trending back upwards, you have an outlet that they can go, a place that they can go and have their school and their conference focused in on and dialed in on. These are all things that I think are great to hype up. And the reality of this is we listened to a lot of the hype yesterday from Jim Phillips about the about the Atlantic Coast Conference. When you look at it through the prism of comparing it to the SEC, yeah, it doesn't sound great, right? It just doesn't sound all that exciting. But I think the point, if you are the ACC right now, you're not competing with the SEC or the Big Ten anymore. You're not. And when Clemson and Florida State settled their lawsuits a number of weeks ago, I told you the reason I believe that a settlement was reached and not a judgment. And the reason I believe a settlement was reached was because the two schools, FSU and Clemson, had an objective. And the ACC had an objective in these lawsuits. For the two schools, the objective was to find a way that you could leave the conference before waiting 9 more years at the time when the lawsuits were filed 9 more years, or actually, no, 10, 11 more years, whatever it is, 2036, to leave the conference and to do so with your grant of rights in hand, with your television rights in hand. Because the problem that a lot of us thought was going to prop up for FSU and Clemson was going to be, even if one day in the distant or not so distant future, the buyout was something that the Big Ten or the SEC was ready to pay. Florida State, Clemson, we will pay your 50, 40, 30, whatever that number ends up being, $1 million buyout if you will jump over. They weren't going to do that because those two schools could not bring their television rights with them. They signed them away in the old grant of rights. I think the ACC's got to know those schools are gone at some point. At some point, the Fan Upstate will not be sending talent to the ACC Media Days anymore. We'll be sending it to either the SEC Media Days to cover 2 schools, or we'll be sending it to the Big Ten Media Days to cover a school. It just will not be the same thing anymore. And that is an inevitability. So the objective to me for the conference was to create a way that you could push Florida State and Clemson leaving the conference back as far as you could. going in front of a judge, having the lawsuits as filed, go in front of a judge and heard, there was a possibility that a judge, after a great argument from a lawyer somewhere, goes, you know what? Actually, we do believe that the ACC did not act properly and in good faith to negotiate for the highest available price. We do not believe that the contract, therefore, signed by Clemson and Florida State are valid, and therefore they can just leave that contract. And what would happen in that spot if that's what happened? What would have happened in that spot is Florida State would have Clemson and probably North Carolina, Miami, Duke would have all left immediately. They'd have been gone immediately. And the ACC would, in that moment, have been out in the cold with nothing to do. So what they did by creating a plan the schools agreed to that decreased the exit fee by a percentage every year until they got all the way down to 2031, and it got down to its lowest. It allowed them to have effectively 6 years. 6 years to figure out what the next step is. So they're going to tout the TV deals, and they're going to tout the ACC net, and they're going to tout all these amazing, fun, fantastic, awesome things that they are doing, because they've got to be fighting now, not just to figure out what they're going to do in 2031 when these schools leave, in my opinion, but they need to be ready to pounce on anybody that is left that can jump in with the remaining schools and leave them as a viable entity in the EEC, the everybody else conference moving forward. That's what all of that was about. So you heard a lot of hype yesterday about how great and amazing and awesome and spectacular the ACC is doing. When you look at it comparatively speaking to the SEC, yeah, you're like, okay, dude, whatever, right? Like, whatever. Great talk. Good talk. That's awesome. But if you look at it through a different lens, if you look at it through the lens of, this is a conference that has bought itself 6 years. They have 6 years to figure out what's next. This is a conference that bought themselves the opportunity to figure out where they go when Florida State and Clemson, probably Miami, North Carolina, Duke, all leave. What are we going to do to survive? And you got 6 years to figure that out, which is why they spend so much time hyping themselves up, because they have to start convincing teams 6 years from now that they are worth the jump. That's how it feels to me. All right, let's take a break. When we come back here in just a minute, there is one more discussion that I want to have about clips we've got from yesterday from both Jim Phillips and Rhett Lashley, because these two entities, the head coach at SMU and the commissioner of the ACC yesterday, both had a similar thought about what needs to happen in order to make sure that the college football playoff is open and fair to everybody and that college sports as a whole can thrive and survive. I'll tell you what that is when we come back on the Rob Brown Show in the Fan Upstate.
Live from the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte. FM Greenville, 97.1 FM Spartanburg. Always streaming wherever you are on the Odyssey app.
Upstate.
Now, back to the 2025 ACC kickoff in Charlotte and a special edition of the Rob Brown Show. Powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
On the Fan, Upstate.
The Rob Brown Show is live from ACC Media Days. Day number 2 getting underway here in just a little over 2 hours from right now at 10 a.m. Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles will take to the podium, followed by Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest throughout the rest of the day. Tomorrow on the show, we will have you clips and quotes from all of the coaches and players that are here. Not only are we live this morning from 6 till 10 a.m., and we'll be hanging out the rest of the day, but Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel will be live here at ACC Media Days from 3 until 7 p.m. this evening. So make sure you check back in as they've got a couple of great interviews lined up and more. I do want to get back to some of the comments that were made yesterday by not just Jim Phillips, but Rhett Lashley, who was the head coach of the SMU Stangers, the Mustangs. And Rhett Lashley's a guy that last year at this event won Lonzo and I over quite a bit. He's kind of just another one of those football dudes. And I actually have a lot of respect for a lot of what Rhett Lashley had to say yesterday. He was giving his speech, and he did not just talk about SMU and the football program. He had some thoughts that he wanted to share about college football in general. And there was one that I think stood out above the crowd, because after about 3 different conversations on some other radio shows and podcasts that I sat in on yesterday afternoon, I came to the recognition and conclusion. I don't think that there is a way that we are going to get to a level playing field unless there is ultimately federal and congressional action to create a set of national standards that all programs and universities are held to. And Rhett Lashley yesterday had the same opinion.
When you start talking about the state of college football, I know there's a lot of questions that will probably come on that, a lot of change, a lot of transition. You know, I do think the CSC and the revenue sharing situation has a chance to be a step in the right direction. It's obviously very new. I think the key to that will be, is there accountability and is it enforced? If it's strictly adhered to, I think it creates good consistency for college football, for coaches, for players, for administrations, and everyone. But that's the key. It's going to have to be held accountable. We still need massive congressional help in a lot of areas, from codifying that a little bit, but also, most importantly, in protecting our players from bad actors in the agency world. There's good agents out there, but all the agents need to be registered. We need to put a cap. I know it's being proposed on the agency commission, so families and players aren't taken advantage of. We need standardized contracts and a lot of things that we need congressional help on, so it's equal across all states. And then,
so that's Rhett Lashley. And he said that there's going to be 2 levels of authority that have to be very involved, respected, have to have the ability to hold people accountable, etc. The first is the College Sports Commission itself. They have to have a level of accountability. They have to have a level of discipline. They have to have an ability to say, you can't do that, and here's the punishment, and have that be followed. But we have also pointed out that there are already lawsuits in certain states around the country that are pushing back against that authority and that ability to act, right? We've talked at length about the lawsuit, for instance, that took place in Tennessee. The Tennessee legislature is pushing forward legislation that effectively mandates that Tennessee and Vanderbilt and the other state colleges and universities must do things in order to continue to have state funding, must do things that are against NCAA and CSC guidelines and policies. And if the NCAA and the CSC step in and they say, hey, look, you can't do that, and the schools have to say, actually, we have to do that. It is enshrined in state law that we must do that. that'll end up in more legislation, but I don't know what that comes to. I don't know what happens with that. I don't know how that lawsuit plays out. And again, I'm not an attorney. There may be some folks out there that have a better thought. We did have a number of attorneys on a handful of weeks ago, and we had this conversation and discussion, and they kind of said the same thing, which is this is kind of a trailblazing era. We don't really know what's going to happen. If the NCAA says you can't this, and a state tells the school, yeah, but you must this, and the NCAA sticks and the state stick the school in the middle, if the NCAA says, okay, well then if you're going to do that, you can't be in our club anymore, is it considered a private club that has the right to do that? Could the NCAA say, okay, Tennessee's out? Because you know that Tennessee is obviously going to sue the NCAA. You know the SEC will sue the NCAA. You know there's going to be tons of litigation if they go in that direction. Is there a win there? Is there a loss there? Could an SEC lose a school out of a state because the NCAA says, hey, you can do whatever you want as a school. You're just not going to compete under our organization? Because the SEC say, okay, well, then they can compete under ours. I don't know how any of that works out. And so that kind of brought me to the next thought, which is I think the only way we are going to end up in a spot where we get answers to that is if there is some sort of congressional federal ruling on this. If there is some sort of legislation from the federal government passed down that says, here are the mandates across all 50 states you must participate. But we also know what happens when the federal government does try to do something like that. States have the right to sue. States have the right to push back with litigation, with lawsuits, and say, no, we don't think you should be allowed to do that. You're overriding our right to govern our public institutions of higher learning the way that we think our local schools should be governed, and that is outside of your purview. And where you land on the political spectrum may go a long way into whether you believe that that is a good thing or that is a bad thing. There's going to be a wide swath of opinion across the entire spectrum there. I guess the point is, and I think this is the reason that a lot of folks are kind of hesitant to really make statements here, is because there's a lot of possibilities. It would be great if every school in the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, the Big 12, the Group of Six, et cetera, if every school just went, yeah, we'll do whatever the CSC says, and we'll all sign a contract that says, if we don't, then X, whatever. It'd be great. But not only are they not going to do that, but at the end of the day, for a lot of these public institutions, it wouldn't matter if they did, because the state governments have the right to step in and get involved. And we have already seen a couple of states, including Tennessee, that have been willing to do just that, to step in and start passing local legislation, state legislation that says you're going to do something that is contrary to what the organization you play under says you must do. And I just don't know where we go. So I listened to Rhett Lashley with his comments. I listened to Jim Phillips with his comments kind of about the same thing. And I think it is one of those things that if you're looking at it from a 36,000 foot view, then yeah, I think you could say, okay, the obvious solution here is Congress steps in and they pass a law and they say, here's the national standards, right? And we can talk about national standards on agents and agency caps and all that. We can step in and we can say, you got to do this, you got to do that. But at the end of the day, and this is another part of the conversation that has been floating around for a while. When it comes down to it, I do think that there is really only one way out of this. And I think it is ultimately that the NCAA and the College Sports Commission are granted some sort of antitrust exemption, like the NFL is, like Major League Baseball is, like the NBA is. I think they would have to be granted some sort of antitrust exemption that allows them to operate in a way that maybe isn't in line with the same laws that similar entities would have to act under. And on top of that, they would have to create a world in which athletes are allowed to unionize and then collectively bargain with that entity. Part of the way that the NFL has gotten and maintains their antitrust exemption to be the lone provider of professional football at that level is all of the labor laws that came attached that allow players to have a union, that allow that union to collectively bargain, to represent NFL players in those collective bargaining agreements, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I said this yesterday. I was on another podcast yesterday, and I said, the more that I've listened to the comments over the past couple of weeks, over the past couple of years, the more that I have paid attention to the conversations that are having on the business side of this, because it is compelling and almost a little nerve-wracking, the direction that all of this is going. The more that I have listened to these conversations, the more that I have taken away from these conversations, the more that I have heard authority figures that are having these conversations speak, the more I have come to the conclusion that I don't think there's a way out of this except for an antitrust exemption like the NFL's, a unionization of the players, a collective bargaining agreement between the two parties, and a licensing of agents who want to participate and be involved, which would need to go to the direction of the NFL as well. So I'm open to ideas. If you've got one, 844-326-3663 is the Hub City Spartanburger text line, 844-326-3663. You can also shoot me a phone call if you've got a thought. And again, like, I know some of you have sent me emails about we can do this, we can do that. And I hope you understand, like, respectfully, I'm going to send you back where I think that there is an issue with the plan. I've seen a bunch of them, and they're all things that I've been able to pick apart based on stuff that's already happened with all of this discussion and debate. So I hear Rhett Lashlee, the head coach at SMU. I hear him saying Congress is going to have to get involved. And I don't think he's wrong about that. I just think the way he thinks that they are going to get involved and solve this, it's not real. It's not real. It's not something that they're just going to be able to say, here's federal legislation. All schools participating in NCAA sports and activities must follow these rules. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And we know that because the minute that the CSC got formed and tried to put those guidelines down, multiple states, including at the forefront, Tennessee, started saying, no, we're not good with that. Our schools are going to be allowed to do this, this, and this. Our schools are going to act this way. Our schools are going to perform these activities. And even if they fly in the face of the NCAA and the CSC, it is state law that they must do these things. And if the states are going to say, in our jurisdiction, we have the right to mandate that our schools are going to operate the way we want them to operate, and there is no question about this, the NCAA does not have authority to tell our state institutions what they may and may not do, what they must and must not do, then you think that they're not going to sue the federal government? You think that they won't sue Congress or whoever it is that they need to sue to prevent congressionally imposed regulations from going into place? Of course they will. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Anytime that there is any sort of federal mandate that comes down about anything that is nationwide, multiple suits will gang up and will sue the federal government to push back. I expect the same to be true here. So I appreciate what Rhett Lashlee said, and I don't even disagree with what Rhett Lashlee had to say. I do think that the only solution to create a world where the access and the opportunity is fair across the board, because we all know, as we've said a gazillion times, the money's just never going to be fair. Okay, it's just never going to be fair. There's never going to be a world where Louisville is going to have Ohio State money. There's never going to be a world where Syracuse is going to have Clemson money. It's just not going to happen. But there is a world where you can put a rule of law across all of college football. I just don't think it is going to come without some sort of creation of an antitrust exemption, just like the NFL. For those of you that have been saying the college football is pointed in a direction where we are going to just be the NFL light, I think you're just going to be the NFL. You're just going to be the NFL with younger players and libraries. That's basically what this is going to come down to. All right, coming up in the next hour of the show, We have told you the schools that are on tap for today: FSU, Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest. We'll take a look at each of those schools in the next hour of the show, the impact, the role that they will have within the conference, and the impact they will have on the betting odds-on favorite Clemson Tigers. We'll do that in the next hour of the show. We will hear some more from Jim Phillips about the future of the ACC, its existence and profitability moving forward. And yes, we're at ACC Media Days. Yes, it's college football for 3 straight days, but I got some other stuff I want to get to too. It's been building up. It's been bubbling. Rob Brown's got some stuff to say about baseball.
I think you already said something when you said
in football.
They'll just be the NFL with libraries
and soccer. I thought that was a good take.
Oh no, that's my favorite thing you said.
I think it's a good take. You know what else is going to be good? The next 60 seconds of your life.
I was going to say really quick, is not as good as the ACC being the quarterback split.
I can't be as funny as Jim Phillips, but I'm
because that's what he was doing. It was being funny because there's no way that guy was being serious.
Comedy for comedy.
I bet you were in the audience. Were people laughing? Did the joke hit?
No, but I think it's because nobody wanted to get kicked out. You know,
okay.
It's kind of like I've had this conversation before. It's kind of like when a politician gives a BS answer and people are like, why didn't the journalist push back? And the answer is because they would get kicked out and lose access to that politician. So they just hope that the listener is smart enough to go, oh, that guy's full of crap. You can't laugh when the commission's speaking. You'll get booted. We'll never get invited back. And by we, I mean they. I would never. The audacity.
Of course not.
The audacity. Hey, the sports flash of quarterbacks. I got nothing. Sports flash.
Quarterbacks and libraries. The Giants ended a 6-game losing streak with a 9-0 shutout win over the Braves in Atlanta last night. Davis Daniel gave up 7 hits and 5 runs through 5 innings, while Wander Suero, in his 3rd appearance, I can't say it without saying it that way, with the Braves, surrendered 4 runs in 2 innings. The final game of the series is today at 12:15. New Orleans Saints defensive back Tyrann Honey Badger Mathieu retired yesterday in a surprise move, stepping away from the league he's played in since 2013, including a Super Bowl win, 3 All-Pro first teams, and 3 Pro Bowls. The Saints immediately signed Julian Blackmon, a former 3rd-round pick who missed a number of games due to a torn labrum last year. In the most recent blow to their bullpen, the L.A. Dodgers sent reliever Tanner Scott to the 15-day DL with elbow inflammation and called up Alex Diaz from AAA Oklahoma City. The Dodgers are already missing Blake Treinen, Michael Kopech, and Bruiser Gretz. Yeah, I can't say that word.
Up to the minute, upstate traffic. No wrecks along the I-85 corridor, so the delays are minimal and construction-related. A ride over and back between Greenville and Spartanburg on Wade Hampton is a clear shot. 185, 385, and Highway 14 are running good through Greenville County.
Rusdar Gatterall,
wide open.
I think. I'm not sure, but that's,
over 385 is under repair. From the News Talk 98.9 WORD Traffic Center, I'm Bill Brooks on The Fan, Upstate. And Doug.
Not a name I've ever seen before.
Emu in its natural habitat.
We're gonna have to wait till Rob gets back to have him pronounce Rusdar. I mean, you guys can't help me because it's stream, so I don't know how to say that name.
Limu, is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
Speaking of handling your
wish everyone could touch on our stuff. You know, Rob's not there, so they just come and touch our stuff.
Cash, even your job. Get the Joy Law Firm on your
Keeping an eye out.
Call Joy 864-888-8888. Attorney Ken Harrell, 114 William Street, Greenville.
I'm gonna make sure that Yes, I did, Stephen. It was amazing. Not.
That is right. That is true. Well, we thank you for the time. We'll see if we can get the dub. See if we can
Rosdar.
Lonzo, and that is the catering at Media Days. Catering at Media Days right now, I'm going to go ahead and say ACC is at this point in my experience undefeated. The food's just been better.
I'm curious, and I don't know if you know this or not. The SEC, is it catered? Because if the ACC is in the same place, then that's the actual cooks at that hotel that make the food.
Yeah, no, it is that. The same is true with the I don't know who brought in the food for the SEC, to tell you the truth. I do know it is the hotel staff here and the hotel restaurant that makes the food here, but I will say it's day 2. It's breakfast on day 2, but it's been like a different spread. Yesterday for lunch, it was a taco bar, which I mean, thank you. I love a good taco bar. Yesterday was a taco bar, but they had like a variety of different proteins available. So they like chicken, and they had them done different ways, and then they had steak done different ways, and then they had pork, and they had this, and then they had a vegetarian taco. If you're one of those people,
sauces. Well, I mean,
they had multiple salsas and sauces, depending on what you wanted, up to and including some your boy likes a little spicy, a little kick to the food. They had some good, some very interesting Latino hot sauces that I went bananas on yesterday, and I may or may not regret later on today, but like worth it yesterday. Solid effort from the ACC in the feeding us department so far as we are live. See how I'm going to segue here to regular radio?
They got that and quarterbacks going for them.
They got and quarterbacks, ladies and gentlemen. The catering of quarterbacks taking place here at ACC Media Days. Day number 2 live in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Rob Brown Show is live from ACC Media Days. Thanks to our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings, love the Ingles. Very grateful to Ingles for having us here today. We have started to look at the 6 schools that are on the docket today at ACC Media Days: Florida State, Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest. And obviously, because we are broadcasting back there in the beautiful upstate of South Carolina, home of the Clemson Tigers, we are looking at everything happening here at Media Days through that particular purple and orange lens as we await the arrival tomorrow, I love you tomorrow, of Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik, TJ Parker, Peter Woods, and the Clemson Tigers. They will be at the dais tomorrow at 12 in the afternoon. We'll bring you live coverage of that. They will be followed by Manny Diaz at Duke. The Hoodie, Bill Belichick at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Dave Doran and NC State at 3 o'clock. Boston College and Virginia Tech will open up the day tomorrow. But let's look at, as we did yesterday, we talked about the 6 schools in play. I think that the University of Miami is Clemson's number 1 opponent this year in the ACC. I also said yesterday, because I was on Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel yesterday afternoon, that show will also emanate here in Charlotte, North Carolina this afternoon for Wire to Wire from ACC Media Days. I was on with Cole and Diesel yesterday, and Diesel wanted to talk a little Miami football. Of course, it was their day. They're on docket, and I think most of us are going to have them at number 2 in the ACC power rankings to begin the season. Diesel said, is Carson Beck the answer, right? Like, is the solution to the disappointment of Miami, is the solution Carson Beck? And I said, listen, I think it's a fair question, but are we going to sit here and pretend like Miami did not have a number 1 overall draft pick at quarterback last year? They had Cam Ward. Like, it's, to me, last year was not a quarterback problem. There were 2 problems that team had. Problem number 1 was that 10-2 in the ACC was looked at as the equivalent of 9-3 in the SEC last year, which meant that when we got to a point where there were very clearly going to be 1, maybe 2 spots that were up for grabs and debate down the stretch, a 10-2 ACC team is going to go behind every 10-2 SEC team, and they're probably going to get stacked behind a couple of 9-3 SEC teams. They didn't do themselves any favors. So problem number 1 was just the fact that last year there was 1 fewer spot than there were teams. Problem number 2 last year, also not the quarterback. We said it a number of times yesterday. The problem was Mario Cristobal. The problem was that there were a number of spots down the stretch that the coaching just went poorly for the Canes. And I think they did themselves in. They shot themselves in the foot. That Georgia Tech game is going to live rent-free in my head for as long as I'm capable of stringing together coherent thoughts. That's how bad it was. So I think Miami's there. I don't think the question is Carson Beck the guy? I think the question is Mario Cristobal the guy? And I think that's fair. I think Rhett Lashlee and SMU are the number 2 threat to Clemson in this conference. They were already a threat to them last year. The other 3 teams that went yesterday, Stanford, Cal, Virginia, I'm not overly concerned about. I would love to see Tony Elliott get this Virginia team turned around and pointed back into the direction of relevance. I don't see it happening right now. Justin Wilcox at Cal, maybe the most detrimental transfer outclass in all of college football. They're replacing everybody. And then Frank Reich at Stanford. I don't understand why Frank Reich's at Stanford. To tell you the truth, I did have a very brief, 30-second conversation with Stanford general manager Andrew Luck yesterday. And I will tell you, I think Andrew Luck is very much committed to making this football team as good as this football program, as good as it can be. I just think they're such a long way off. As far as the threats today, do I think that Florida State is a threat to Clemson in the ACC this year? Not really, but I don't think this year is when you're worried about Florida State. I think next year is. And I think it is going to be largely dependent on whether or not this is the bounce back year that Mike Norvell is going to try to sell us on it being 1 hour and 52 point some odd minutes from now when FSU takes to the podium. I don't know if Florida State has a bounce back year. I don't know what a bounce back year for Florida State is. Is bowl eligibility a bounce back year? 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins. What is the mark for bounce back? I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is Florida State kind of went half and half on the class this year. They went about half portal. They went about half high school recruits. Florida State brought a guy in Thomas Castellanos that they believe has the talent to get it done in the correct offense. They went and got Gus Malzahn, who is the guy who coached Cam Newton back in his Auburn days as his HC. We know works well with dual threat quarterbacks. Thomas Castellanos is one. Does that make them a threat? I'm not there yet. I think Florida State will have a better year this year. The only problem is 3-9 is a better year. So I'm not ready to say what I think it is. I've already said Florida State to me in this conference this year is the big question mark, because I would not be shocked if this team went 4-8. I would not be shocked if this team went 8-4. I would be a little shocked if they went 9-3 or better, but it wouldn't be like, the scene in Scanners where the guy's head explodes shocked. It would just be like, oh, damn, Norvell, nice job. Good bounce back. We will see. Louisville, I'm so up in the air on, because I do think Jeff Brom is a very good head coach. I do think that Jeff Brom is a guy that can start to make Louisville a much more consistent team. I just don't know what they look like. Here's what I do know, or at least I do think. I think a lot of folks that cover this conference are going to be shocked by Miller Moss, the quarterback who comes over from USC. And on top of that, Miller Moss, who was known to have a big arm, we question the decision-making. I think that's more than fair. Miller Moss, 372 yards, 6 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl in 2023. He beat Jeff Brom in Louisville in Brom's first year, started 9 games last year, threw for over 2,550 yards, 18 touchdowns, did have a 3-interception game late in the season that cost him the starting job in a decision that was like, I don't know how I feel about that pull in that spot, but it ended up to him going into the portal. Here's the reality. Jeff Brom's going to latch on a quarterback. He's going to throw it 40 times a game, and he's going to live and die by that quarterback. I honestly think Miller Moss is going to surprise some people this year. I honestly think Miller Moss is going to catch some of y'all asleep at the wheel. And I think if you are a team that does not either have A, the ability to get to the quarterback and to cut short the pass game, or B, excellent defensive backs around your defensive backfield, I think Miller Moss is going to catch some people sleeping this year. On the defensive side of the ball, that's kind of the question. They are a team that loves to generate pressure and turnovers. 70 sacks and 38 turnovers in the past 2 years. This is a team. Hear that again. 70 sacks, 38 turnovers in 2 years. That is a shocking number at this point. That being said, a lot of turnover. There is some experience. CJ Quinn, Stanquan Clark as the two top returning tacklers, both 82, 76 tackles, both of them back this year. But Conga, 20 tackles, 2.5 sacks in 11 games, is the only other returning starter. However, they're replacing 8 guys across their defense. So to me, if you're a team taking on Louisville, take good care of the football, attack the defense, attack the inexperience in the defensive backfield, and recognize you might get into some shootouts. I don't know, and it is all going to depend on Miller Moss. If I am correct about Miller Moss at quarterback, I think I might very well, and I've got to consider who else we've still got to talk about. We've still got to talk about Georgia Tech and Brent Key. We've still got to talk about Duke and Manny Diaz because, listen, Duke's given you some scares the last couple of years. But as of right now, if I am power ranking the teams in the ACC that are the biggest threat to Clemson, assuming Clemson is number 1, I think I'm putting Louisville number 3. I'm a big Jeff Brom guy. I think Miller Moss is going to shock some people. Again, why did he get benched coming out of USC? Well, is anybody going to sit here and make the argument that Lincoln Riley has been a illustration of great decision-making at USC since he left Oklahoma to go out there? I don't think the answer to that is yes. In fact, quite the opposite. I think the answer would be Lincoln Riley might get fired at the end of this year. That has been, I would make the argument, one of the biggest misses in college football hiring, recent at least, history. It's just been bad. Yeah, he had a bad game. I understand why they made the pull. When dude was on pace to cross 3,000 yards, or at least get real close to 3,000 yards last year, when the completion percentage was good, the touchdown to interception ratio was fantastic. Why did that move get made in that spot? I asked it last year, and I don't care about USC. And it was such an impactful decision that I asked the question last year. If this kid steps in, and this kid can be the quarterback Jeff Brom has needed for a couple of years here, I think you've got some possibility that this team climbs from ACC contender to a team that could steal it. I think that is a realistic possibility. They have been a team that's been sitting on 10-4, 9-4, 10-4 seasons the last couple of years. Can they get to 11? Can they get to 12 if we include an ACC championship or a bowl game? I think so. I am putting right now the number 1 contender to Clemson's throne in the ACC this year is Miami. The number 2 is SMU, and I'm going to say number 3 is Louisville. I think this team is built well. I think Jeff Brom may have finally found his quarterback. The question mark is going to be, is there a wide receiver that jumps up there? They are bringing back they're bringing back Chris Bell, and they're bringing back at running back Isaac Brown. Isaac Brown is got the opportunity to be a stud. Over 1,170 yards last year. They also bring back Duke Watson, who was just a tick shy of 600 yards on the ground last year. Both of those guys coming back. Jeff Brom has a good enough running attack that he can fling it down the field, and if teams start to get a little crazy coming after the quarterback, that tandem of running backs give them an option. It is the wide receiver spot that you've got to keep an eye on. You've got a dude in Chris Bell. This is the cat I'm interested in because Chris Bell's a little bit of a hothead. He's an emotional player. Emotions on the sleeve, gonna act out, gonna go nuts every now and then. If that is the case, that's the type of person that's not going to fly in Jeff Brom's offense because it's got to be very regimented, very disciplined. And if Chris Bell's going to be that guy, I don't know what can get there. Here's what I do know about Chris Bell. What I do know about Chris Bell is if Chris Bell lives up to potential and doesn't become his own worst enemy, Chris Bell is a prototypical NFL wide receiver. I mean, just built like a wide receiver. Chris Bell is prototypical, and I think that he, along with Miller Moss, could end up being a ton of fun this year. Louisville is a team that I genuinely think could average 40 points a game this year. I think when we get to the end of the season, there is a better than good chance that we are talking about Louisville inside the top 2 or 3 offenses in all of college football last year. Listen, we go back to their schedule last year. They took a loss to Notre Dame, a 1-score loss. They took a loss to SMU, a 1-score loss. They took a loss to Miami. That was a 1-score loss. And they took a loss at Stanford. One of the narratives about Jeff Brom the last couple of years has been that this Louisville team They always seem to lose one game they shouldn't lose. That Stanford game was it. They had no business losing to that Stanford team, even on the road. They always drop one they shouldn't. If they get rid of that, they're a 9-win football team last year. And then if they can, because, you know, the old Rob Brown catchphrase, a good team wins all the games they should. A great team wins all the games they should and half the games that they should not. The truly great teams don't have any games they shouldn't lose. But right now, I would make the argument that Louisville is sitting at good team with the hinge of, it seems like every year they lose one dumb game that they should not lose. Last year was at Stanford. If they wipe that, who do they lose to? Playoff Notre Dame, playoff SMU, and probably should have been in the playoff Miami. They lose to 3 playoff teams and go 9-3. So how do they take that to the next level? How do they get rid of the dumb Stanford loss? And how do they start picking off one of those games? How do they start picking off Notre Dame, SMU, Miami? And Miller Moss coming into the fold might be the answer. So right now, on my power ranking of teams that are a threat to Clemson for the 2025 ACC football season, I have got Miami at number 1, even though I do not trust Mario Cristobal at all. I have got SMU at number 2 because I do trust Rhett Lashley and Kevin Jennings to run it back. And I got Louisville at number 3. I'm also going to tell you, I think number 4 is getting up to the podium today as well. And we will talk about that coming up a little bit later on in the show. When we come back, Rhett Lashley had another point that he made yesterday that I wanted to address. He spoke out specifically about one aspect of the college football postseason that I have addressed many, many times. Do Rhett Lashley and I agree on the concept of a college football playoff committee being the decision-making power? We'll find out when we come back. Rob Brown, Lonzo, and you. The Rob Brown Show is on your radio. It is the Fan Upstate. The Rob Brown Show back on your radio. It is the Fan of State. Rob Brown, the great one, Lonzo, and you. The college football playoffs are going to 16. It's not official yet, but it will be, and they are, because there's just too much money out there. It has to happen. There is no other way, in my opinion. Well, what that looks like has been obviously a debate for the past few weeks. Greg Sankey wants, as does the SEC, a 5+11 model. Tony Petitti argued again yesterday, kind of shifted up his model a little bit. He said he wants a 4-4-2-2-1-3 model. That would say 4 to the Big Ten, 4 to the SEC, 2 to the ACC, 2 to the Big 12, 1 to the highest ranked group of 6 team, and then 3 at-large bids after that. Both of those still involve the selection committee. Rhett Lashley yesterday, the head coach at SMU, did not just talk about his football team. He really kind of took an overall perspective on all of college football, and that included a discussion about what the expanded college football playoff will ultimately look like.
I think we need to reimagine the college football playoff. You know, it's at a time where I know it's being discussed. The players and the fans come first. That's what we're supposed to be about. I think more is always better. I know it's out there. I think 16 teams would be great. More access for more teams, more players, more conferences. You know, the committee has a really hard decision. We were up close and personal with that a year ago, and I respect what they have to do. But honestly, it's a situation that's set up for failure because there's human bias, and there's always going to be. So I think if we could remove a committee from the situation, it would help, because there's no other major professional sport or major sport in America or the world that uses a committee to select their tournament participants. And you look in America, it's the NFL and it's college football. So I think we need to relook at that. And
so he says we got to get rid of the committee. He said it's the only sport, the only major sport where a selection committee is utilized to determine who plays in the postseason. And he is absolutely correct about that. The NFL has a formula that they utilize. If you win your division, you are in. If you are one of the best 2 or 3 teams that do not win your division, you are in as a wild card team. Wild card teams travel to divisional winners. Higher seeds host lower seeds, all the way to the Super Bowl. All well, great, good. Same with the Major League Baseball. Same with the NBA. Same with the NHL. In the FIFA World Cup, you got to go through World Cup qualifying to get there. That is absolutely correct what Rhett Lashley had to say. And I would also make the argument that I keep hearing that discussion and that debate, and that's great. What's your formula? All
right, really quick, because what I'm hearing is does he want AI to pick it? Because it sounds like he wants to go back to computers.
I got a text yesterday from a buddy of the show who was listening to Rhett Lashley's press conference. And he said, do you think Rhett Lashley understands that he just invented the BCS? And I went, nah. I mean, yes, but also probably nah. The reality of the situation is very simple here. And it's that no matter what system we end up utilizing, there's going to be a lot of other people who hate it. And we could go back to the BCS tomorrow, and half the people would say it sucks. And then we could go back to a playoff committee, and half the people would say it would suck. Like, that's just part of how it works.
Let's see who ChatGPT has picked to be in the college football playoff.
I'm going to keep it a buck with you here. The more that these discussions go on, the more solidified I become in the belief that it might be AI that ultimately has to get called in to handle this. Now, I've given you my proposal on what a college football dramatic, but I like it. I have given you my proposal on what a college football playoff selection committee would look like. And that playoff selection committee would be enormous. I would have literally hundreds of votes from all around the country. I would have folks on the East Coast, up the Atlantic Seaboard, across the Southeast, the Midwest, the Heartland, California, IA, the Great Pacific Northwest. I would have hundreds of people participating in a college football playoff selection, because what was Rhett Lashley's biggest concern, problem, takeaway from all of that? You cannot eliminate human bias, and I agree entirely. It is nearly impossible to get rid of a human bias when you are asking people to pick who gets benefits and who gets drawbacks, who gets rewarded and who gets punished. But the way that you eliminate a bias, let's all go back to our junior year taking statistics in high school. The way that you get rid of a bias is to have a larger sample size. You have more participants. That's how you eliminate a bias. So if you're not going to get rid of the committee, it's real simple. Make the committee friggin' enormous, okay? Make it big. Now, I'm not saying just get a bunch of nobodies. I mean, follow people who cover the sport and who are at games and who are watching and who are producing content and who are actively engaged in college football. Don't just go grab a bunch of nobodies. Like, get people who are involved in coverage of the sport and ask hundreds of them to rank the teams, and then just take their cumulative score. Because if you want to get away from the committee and you want to go back to computers, which is, here's the thing. What Rhett Lashley was arguing there was not to go back to computers either. I think Rhett Lashley, in bringing up the NFL, in bringing up the FIFA World Cup, in bringing up all of these different events in which there is a formula to determine who goes and who does not. If you X, then you are in. If you X -1, you are wild card. If you X -2, you are out of the postseason. You cannot participate. That's all well and good. But again, those are formulas that you can fill out and you can say, here are the results. And because this team did this, they're in. And because that team did that, they are out. I still don't think you can do that in college football. There are too many teams. There's too much talent. There is too much difference in the way that the game is played all around the country. I don't think what Rhett Lashley is asking for is a possibility. You know, if somebody would like to take the time to draw something up to prove me wrong, I am totally super duper great with that. But I don't think you can draw up a formula. I think your formula is, and because here's the other reality, like the only way to enact a formula is to do the at-large qualifiers. To do the automatic qualifiers, right? The only way to have some sort of formula would be the Big Ten gets 4, and it's the top 4 teams in the Big Ten. The SEC gets 4, it's the top 4 teams. The ACC gets 2. There are 2 conference championship participants. The Big 12, 2 conference championship participants. That is formulatic, but I also think it creates a formula where there is an inherent lack of available spots unless you're in one of those 4 conferences. You are talking about eating up 12 of 16 spots between 4 conferences. And I am aware that the other conferences, the group of 6 conferences, maybe have never produced a team that was genuinely capable of winning a national championship. And so maybe you say this is proportionate to history. Proportionate to history, the group of 6 has never put forward a team that was a legitimate national championship contender. Every time we have sent a team, they've gotten it handed to them, so they get 1 spot for all the best of them. And maybe one year, if they win it, we can evaluate. And I get that. But I still think, are you telling me that there's no years where the ACC will have 3 worthy playoff teams? Not 4, not 5, not 6, just 3. Are you telling me there's no years that the Big 12 won't have 3 worthy playoff spots? And with only 3 at-larges as Tony Petitti threw out there, that's not guaranteed that they get one of those, right? Like there may be other teams out there, even though there are 3. Again, I argued last year, Miami, despite the dumbass loss to Georgia Tech, was a playoff team. There are years it will happen. I want it to be, as Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the league, said, I want it to be as open for access to everybody in the country as it can be, even if it is just the Big Ten and the SEC taking turns winning the Natty every year. It's just Big Ten, SEC, SEC, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, SEC, SEC, Big Ten, SEC, SEC. Even if they're just alternating it back and forth, I still think everybody ought to start every year with the same opportunity to get in. And the reality is, if you do the 4-4, 2-2, 3-1-1, or whatever the hell it is, that's not statistically speaking, not how that works. I get Rhett Lashley wanting to get rid of the committee. If you want to get rid of the committee, genuinely, and I've thought about this a lot last night. In fact, I had a long conversation with a buddy of mine over a couple of brewskis watching the New York Liberty game last night. If you want to get rid of the committee, you have two options, which is A, go back to the BCS, B, you go formulatic, in which case you just say every conference is top 2, and whatever that number of necessary playoff spots ends up being, you create a bracket that says every conference sends their top 2, and we'll see what happens. Or you end up going to, as Lonzo played the hilarious music a minute ago, you end up going to AI, and you allow everybody to discuss and debate what they want, how they, and you feed it all into Grok, or you feed it all into Siri, or you feed it all into ChatGPT, or you feed it all into whatever AI, or maybe all of them, and you say, based on every number in college football that we keep track of, every statistic, every number we can take into consideration, time and temperature and date of games, number of fans, home, away, statistics against this stat or that, down and distance, whatever, considering every single possible number that exists in college football, who are the 16 best teams? And let AI come up with it.
You have to pick one. If you pick multiple AIs, then you have a committee of AIs.
I mean, at least it's not a committee of people, because people are bad and dumb, according to Rhett Lashley. Hey, we got to take a break. We'll come back here in just a minute. Got a few more thoughts I want to get to. Rob Brown, the Great Malonzo, and you. The Rob Brown Show is live from ACC Media Days. I'm very good at this. Presented by our friends at Ingles. It's the Fan Upstate.
From a 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown. Listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local agent. Low prices, love the savings.
Only on the Fan Upstate.
I'm Chuck Sanders. Here's the Sports Flash presented by Progressive. The Braves got blanked 9-0 at home.
SEC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. Thanks to Ingles for being incredible friends and corporate sponsors and for getting us here. You guys have lit up the text line over the course of the show today. So I do want to go through some of the texts y'all have sent and responded to them. Talking about Jim Phillips, who announced yesterday a couple of new policies for the Atlantic Coast Conference. One of them was that Atlantic Coast Conference teams are no longer allowed to storm fields/courts after basketball and football games, and there will be an increasing financial penalty. There it is. That's the word I'm going for. Increasing financial penalty against schools who allow it to happen. However, Phillips did say that those penalties will not be imposed if schools allow officials and opposing teams to exit the playing field or court before the storming takes place. There was a conversation about, will this impact Clemson gathering at the Paw after the games? The answer is no, provided Clemson provides time for the officials and for the visiting team to clear the field and get out of the way. Texter said, what about planting the flag like U of M at Ohio State? Nothing's been said about that yet. I assume that players on the field can do what players on the field are going to do. This is a policy that only impacts non-participants from entering the field after the game is over.
All right, I have a question that probably considered semantic. I don't know. Is it storming the field if it's organized?
Is it storming the field if it's organized? First off, that is a semantics question, Lonzo, and it is exactly the type of semantics questions that I absolutely adore, love, and want to be able to absolutely take into consideration. That's a great question. I'm going to say the answer is no, that is not a storm. I think that a storm has to be kind of organic, unpredictable.
Yeah, unexpected. Exactly.
So yeah, I would say no, it is not storming. However, there's not enough. The policy doesn't say the word storm. It's just entering the field. So the gathering in the park can still happen, but Clemson will have to make it very well known to the gathered crowd that you must wait until the opposing team and the officials have left the playing surface. Texter said, Rob, when you talk baseball, can you give some thoughts on the mighty Dodgers and their struggles despite being a ridiculously overpaid super team and what it means for their postseason ambitions? That's from Dewey. Dewey, I appreciate the text as always. The Dodgers are having a year across their pitching staff of the most ridiculous injuries I've seen in a very long time. I don't know what to tell you. They have had a stable worth of pitchers get injured so far this year. They have had pitchers. They're at one point they had Decker and I would have in this joke on a Saturday that the Dodgers had at one point a better starting lineup of injured pitchers than most teams in MLB just had pitchers. Let me give you the names that the Dodgers have lost of main roster players who have missed at least some time. Tanner Scott, Blake Treinen, Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki, Michael Kopech, Tony Gonsolin, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Michael Grove, Brusdar Graterol, Evan Phillips, Kyle Hurt, Ben Kasparius. All of those players. That is 13 of them. If you include the fact that Shohei Ohtani entered the year hurt and right now is getting starts but is only throwing 1 or 2 innings as he continues to effectively have in-game rehab starts, there are 14 Dodgers pitchers that have been at one point or another relied on that have gone down to the 15-day DL or longer. 14 pitchers if you include Shohei Ohtani. At the end of the day, they went all in on this roster with the deferred payments and owing more than $1 billion in payer payments and yada, yada, yada. And yes, it's funny. Haha, it sucks to be you, whatever. Dude, no team is going to be okay when they have 15 players get banged up. It's just not going to happen. Spike texted the show and said there was a discussion elsewhere yesterday about ACC strength of schedule. Does Miami have a rough schedule, and does Georgia Tech have an easy schedule this year? Fair questions. And again, I fully understand that the jokes about the ACC have some level of merit. So let's look very quickly at what I think are the top 3 teams that would contend with Clemson this year. Looking at Miami's schedule, they open with Notre Dame. That's not just the playoff contender. That's one of the shortest 5 odds to win the Natty this year. Bethune-Cookman, South Florida, and Florida all at home. Is Florida going to be a good team or not under DJ Lagway? A lot of questions about it. I think the answer is yes. I have bought into the DJ Lagway hype. If he is that dude, that's a tough game. Then they got to go to Tallahassee. Is it a bounce-back year for Florida State? I don't know. I'd like to think so for behalf of the Noles down there in Tallahassee, that it can't get worse than last year, but there's a lot of transfer guys in that have got to find their spot. Then they play Louisville, who I think is the 3rd biggest contender to Clemson in this conference. Stanford at SMU, who I think is the 2nd biggest contender for Clemson in this conference. And then they end with Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pittsburgh. If Miami doesn't blow it against a dumb team somewhere down the stretch, then I absolutely think Miami has enough resume building in front of them that 10-2 this year might get them in. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I also think that there will be a slew of 10-2 and 9-3 teams in the SEC, so the door may be opened a little bit, but I think they can get there. As far as Georgia Tech, at Colorado, Gardner-Webb, Clemson at the crib, Temple at the crib. Then they're at Wake Forest, back home for Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse, at NC State, at Boston College, back home for Pittsburgh, and then Georgia. Lonzo, I would say right now, looking at that Georgia Tech schedule, honestly, there's 2 teams that I think they are underdogs to right now today. And I think those 2 teams are Clemson and Georgia at the end of the year. I think I would take Georgia Tech over Wake, Virginia Tech. Duke is an interesting team. We've talked about them at length. I'd take them over Syracuse. Dave Dorn and NC State, probably kind of an even level match. I'd take them over Boston College. I'd take them over Pitt. So the answer to your question, Spike, is yeah, Miami's got a relatively rough schedule ahead of them, but it is a resume builder schedule. And Georgia Tech has a relatively easy schedule ahead of them for a team that is on the upward trajectory. That's where I land on those 2. Spike, I appreciate that text. Jacob in Spartanburg has sent a couple of texts. He said March Madness, the greatest postseason of all sports, has a committee. Here's the take I've had. This is one of my 2 hottest takes in sports. My hottest take in all of sports is that every NFL stadium should be domed. That's my hottest take in sports. Y'all hate that take. I don't care. I'm right. You're wrong. My second hottest take in all of sports is that the NCAA March Madness basketball tournament is the most entertaining postseason in sports. It is far from the best. Why is it far from the best? Because the best teams rarely, in my opinion, win the title. It's hard to do. It's hard to run undefeated. And considering it's a one-and-done format that you've got to win in the round of 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, and 2. You got to win 6 games to get to a natty. A one-and-done format is not it. Why do you think that every other sport, with the exception of the National Football League, even hockey, plays series? Because the way that you find out who is truly a better team is to play series, not one-off games. But you are correct. It does have a committee. And yet every year we moan and complain about the teams that got snubbed off the bubble in the March Madness tournament. So I don't know that Rhett Lashley's argument is wrong there either, even if I disagree with the concept behind it. Jacob said, I just asked ChatGPT, based on preseason rankings and predictions, who should be in the 12-team playoff in college football this year, and it spit out a bunch of not-so-crazy stats. Jacob actually sent me, he asked Perplexity to give him its playoff predictions just for the preseason, Mark. In fact, Lonzo, I'm going to write these down so we can circle back around and check in on these when we get to the end of the year. Here are the 12 teams that they put into the playoffs. You ready? They've got the 1 seed Texas, projected SEC champion. Number 2, Penn State, projected Big Ten champion. Number 3, Ohio State. Number 4, Georgia. Number 5, Clemson, favorite in the ACC. Number 6, Notre Dame. Number 7, Oregon. Number 8, LSU. Number 9, Alabama. Number 10, and they notate a surprise team, Oklahoma. Number 11, Boise State, projected Group of 5 conference champ. And number 12, Arizona State, projected Big 12 champ. Outside of Oklahoma, and I'm going to keep it a buck, I wouldn't be stupid shocked, a little shocked, but not stupid shocked, if Oklahoma got in. They love their quarterback, and they love the offense that Brent Venables is now allowing someone else to run. Outside of Oklahoma, I don't hate the list.
How many Big Ten teams are in there?
Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, so 3.
How many SEC?
Texas, Georgia, LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma, 5. This is also, by the way, an illustration a couple of days ago. Remember when Greg Sankey started the week off at SEC Media Days last week, and he talked about the 5+11, and that's the SEC's model. And I said, guys, this actually makes a lot of sense, because there will be 0 years where the SEC team does not, in a 5+11, there will be 0 years that they do not get 4 teams in. It just won't have. Go look at any given year dating back to the year 2000. Find me a year where the SEC would not have had 4 teams in the playoffs. They'll have 4 in every year. So the 5+11 model gives them an easier path to get 5 in. And there are some years, rare, but some years, and I think last year is one of those years, some years they might get 6 in. The 5+11 model gives the SEC the opportunity to get more teams in more frequently versus the Big Ten, who I think it is usual they'll get 4. I don't think it's going to be uncommon that they only have 3. It is going to be rare the Big Ten, at least in the current landscape, rare the Big Ten gets 5. So the model that the Big Ten is pitching with a 4 guarantees them they're getting 4 when there will be a number of years where they might only get 3. And I think that is why those two conferences are squabbling. Jacob and Spartanburg did text back and say it didn't put Carolina in the playoff, though, so screw ChatGPT. All right, cool enough. I respect that. I like smack talking to AI because they don't like my football team. Texter said, why not a college football Congress with 100 representatives from around every area of the country, free of bias and lobbying, like the real... Oh, wait, never mind. That's a good text. I like that a lot. And Texter said, if you want to get rid of the committee, you're going to have to take stuff away from rich people, and that never goes well. Also fair. Now, again...
They don't... Oh, wow. That counts. They don't get paid to be on the committee, do they?
They do not get paid to be on the committee, but obviously at the same time, it's like anything else. If you get onto the committee, you become a public figure, and you can ordinarily segue that into doing different things.
Aren't those people already public figures, though?
Quick
listen, I'm just trying to... Okay.
Quick time out. Sorry. I just looked over at the stairs. Yesterday, it was announced that Jimbo Fisher signed on to be the newest ACC guy, and I think I just watched Jimbo Fisher roll into the building, hilariously enough. I want to go over
Is he walking well? I mean, he's getting older. I mean, I don't know.
Getting older. He's making $1 billion a year to not coach Texas A&M.
It's not going to make you
he's fine.
walk better. I was just wondering how his health was.
Here's what I do.
I mean, he's had plenty of time to rest. I mean, you know.
What I do want to go ask him is, hey, remember when you signed on to be the Texas A&M coach and they gave you a big plaque with all those empty spaces to start inscribing all of your national championship wins? Where's that, Jimbo? Where's that? Did you keep it? Is it hanging on your wall? Did you hang it like I hung the red sequin jacket in the office as an inspirator?
And just go over and do some Texas A&M cheers in front of them, and you'll endear yourself to them. You can get right in there and ask the real questions.
Oh, God, those nerds. Cold. Lonzo has a cult following because of his sports flashes.
Yeah, and all those people are weird. The Giants ended a 6-game losing streak with a 9-0 shutout win over the Braves in Atlanta last night. Davis Daniel gave up 7 hits and 5 runs through 5 innings, while Wander Suero, in his 3rd appearance with the Braves, surrendered 4 runs in 2 innings. The final game of the series is today at 12:15. New Orleans Saints defensive back Tyrone Honey Badger Matthew retired yesterday in a surprise move, stepping away from the league he's played in since 2013, including a Super Bowl win, 3 All-Pro first teams, and 3 Pro Bowls. Saints immediately signed Julian Blackmon, a former 3rd-round pick who missed a number of games due to a torn labrum last year. In the most recent blow to their bullpen, the LA Dodgers sent reliever Tanner Scott to the 15-day DL with elbow inflammation and called up Alex Diaz from AAA Oklahoma City. The Dodgers are already missing Blake several players.
Up to the minute upstate traffic. There are several stretches of I-85 through the upstate. where you
Several
drop below
players.
posted speeds.
I ran out of time.
I like it.
It was more of a time thing that it was, you know.
We're missing Blake. Yeah, several players.
Road.
Fantastic.
Remember the
Day number 2 of ACC Media Days getting underway here in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Rob Brown Show live and in living color, courtesy of our friends at Ingles Supermarkets. Love the prices, love the savings. Thanks to Ingles for being a spectacular season partner and getting us here to ACC Media Days, last week to SEC Media Days, because it is indeed my dudes and dudettes college football season. Can't wait. We are in the countdown. We are now inside of the last month and some change. As a matter of fact, if you want it, if you need it, if you're the type of junkie like me that is more than willing on Saturday, August 23rd, to sit down and watch Idaho State and UNLV. If you are down for Sam Houston at Western Kentucky, if you are down to take a late night trip out to the Clarence T.C. Ching Athletics Complex in Honolulu, Hawaii, when the Warriors host the Stanford Cardinal, we are a month to the day away, because those games are on August 23rd. My dudes and my dudettes.
State. Woo!
In fairness, also, you have Iowa State and Kansas State at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, Ireland on that same day, kicking us off at noon. We also have Fresno State at Kansas. Kansas, a 13.5-point favorite. If you like them now, on that same day at 6:30 at night. Sam Houston, Western Kentucky at 7. Stanford at Hawaii is at 7:30. Then just 5 days later on Thursday, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, great one. You can plan that on Friday, August 29th, your boy is going to be exhausted, because Friday night, full slate: Stony Brook, San Diego State; Boise State, South Florida; Ohio, Rutgers; Lafayette, Bowling Green; ECU, NC State; Jacksonville State, UCF; Delaware State, Delaware; St. Francis, UL Monroe in Monroe, Louisiana. Let's go Warhawks. We have got Wyoming, Akron; Central Arkansas, Mizzou; Elon at Duke; UT Martin at Oklahoma State; Buffalo at the Golden Gophers; Stephen F. Austin at Houston; Alabama State at UAB; Nebraska at Cincinnati; and we wrap it up with Miami, Ohio at Wisconsin at 9 o'clock on Thursday.
That's on Thursday.
That's all on Thursday.
But it's an extended weekend, because we get that following Monday off.
Good
So,
super duper thing, because your boy's going to be tired, because we also have Friday night with Tarleton State at Army, Western Michigan at Michigan State, Kennesaw State at Wake, Appy State at Charlotte, Bethune-Cookman at FIU, Western Illinois at regular Illinois, Wagner at Kansas, Auburn at Baylor, Georgia Tech at Colorado on a Friday night at 8 p.m., UNLV Sam Houston, Central Michigan at San Jose State, and then obviously on August 30th, Bleep hits the fan that day, because we are starting off with Syracuse at Tennessee. We are starting off at noon with Texas, Ohio State. We got Alabama at FSU at 3:30 on that day. We roll on into the night slate, which has LSU at Clemson at 7:30, and we're playing football games that kick off on Saturday. Lonzo, Utah, UCLA, Colorado State at Washington at 11 o'clock at night. LFG.
All right, so I'm pretty excited for a couple of those games, and that's Ohio State, Texas, obviously, and I want to see if the Clemson hype is real going up against LSU.
I want to find out.
I just want to see Chip Kelly. I want to see Chip Kelly melt down on the sideline as he's getting his butt beat, because that's probably going to happen. We'll see.
We will indeed. So we are a month to the day away from a little Thursday night action to start off week one in the
also
college
a
football
week and a
landscape.
day away from NFL football. So we're good. We're back. We're all right.
I believe we are.
And I thought it was this week, and I was all excited about thinking it was tomorrow, but it's not.
That is a bummer.
It's next week.
It is next Thursday, 1 week and 1 day away. That is absolutely and entirely correct. All right, we are live at ACC Media Days as we get set today. Mike Norvell and the Seminoles of Florida State take to the podium at 10 a.m. They will be followed at 11 by the Louisville Cardinal, led by Jeff Brom, and their quarterback Miller Moss. At 12 o'clock, Fran Brown will take to the stage representing the Syracuse Orange. At 1 p.m., Pat Narduzzi and the Pitt Panthers. And by the way, I just saw Pat Narduzzi walk by just a minute ago. So the Pitt Panthers are in the house. Brent Key and the rambling wreck of Georgia Tech will be at the podium at 2 p.m. and then at 3 o'clock, Jake Dickert, the new head coach of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, replacing Dave Clawson, will step up to the mic as well. We will be here throughout the day, the show for another hour. Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel will go live at 3 p.m. this
By the way,
afternoon.
Diesel just stuck his head in the door and said good morning.
Oh, that's sweet.
So he's here and ready to go, ready to head up there. So
I'm glad to hear
look
it.
out.
I got told that they were going to be here at like 12:30. I
haven't seen
doubted that.
Cole. I haven't seen Cole yet.
Well, Diesel's going to meet Cole in Boiling Springs, and they're riding together. They're carpooling because they're good, environmentally conscious young men, and I appreciate that about
you
them.
and I would never do that. So
mainly because you don't want to listen to my music on the way up.
and you're probably afraid of my driving. So
I cannot confirm nor deny. All right. So we are talking about ACC Media Day. I got a few more things that I wanted to play from yesterday, and then in the next segment, I am going to talk about a couple of other sports topics that we have not gotten a chance to. One of the things that this is, as we have talked about it, all media days are, is a propaganda extravaganza. It is an opportunity for the conferences and the players and coaches within them to tell you just how super duper crazy amazing they are at football. And one of the guys who had no problem doing that was SMU coach Rhett Lashley.
Our league has separated itself as one of the top 3 leagues in America. I mean, the data speaks for itself, whether it's the revenue generation that we did this past year. I know the commissioner spoke to, 3 leagues have a network. Our network 5 years in is thriving and does a great job covering us. 3 leagues had multiple CFP participants this year. We were one of them. And I think sometimes, I was fortunate to win a national championship in 2010 when I was at Auburn. And since then, over the last 14 seasons, one league's won 8 championships, and 2 other leagues, us and the Big Ten, have won 3 national championships. So, and another league hasn't won any. So I think that just shows you where our league has been on the national stage and where we think we'll continue to be and where we belong. And on top of it, I know it's been talked about here, we have the toughest non-conference strength of schedule in all of college football. And we're going to partake in that this year as we play 2 really good teams from the Big 12 and Baylor and TCU that are both 9-win teams a year ago.
Yeah, take that. Take that, SEC. Take that. Take that shot. Rhett Lashley saying the SEC has had the same 6 schools win the championship dating back to 1964. Not a single SEC title has been different since 1964. That's top heavy to me. That's not depth. Okay.
how many of those teams has your team beat? I'm just curious.
I mean, again, it's not like he's
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about him.
Oh yeah, no. The teams that I have coached have beaten no SEC teams, historically speaking. I'm working on it. I'm just saying, like, in just a minute, when Pat Narduzzi walks by, I will absolutely tell him that I'm up to be his defensive coordinator next year. Yeah. So he made that comment. The 6 SEC programs, because I don't know when I played that, Zoe, if you had the same reaction that I did, but when he said that yesterday, I was like, wait, that's not right. Is that right? That's not right. Is that right? That can't be right. 1964, I'm bad at math, but that's a very, very long time ago. That can't be right. And then I went and looked, and he's absolutely correct, with one exception where Kentucky split a share of the 1976 title with Georgia. Every program, or every SEC championship collected since 1964 has belonged to one of those 6 schools: Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee. That's it. That's the entire list. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that, like, oh yeah, I'm Team Lashley on this one. Like, all right, whatever. Like, I mean, I guess sure, you can make the argument that it's top heavy, that it's 6 teams sharing every title dating back to 1964.
All right, I'm presently going to look at the Big Ten, which is probably like the same.
I'm sure it's going to be. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be probably very similar.
So what did he actually say? He didn't say anything really. Is he just saying, "Oh, the ACC has parity"? Is that what he's saying? Because it doesn't.
No, I think what he is saying is that the argument he was making, and for the record, no, the ACC is not as good as the SEC. I think even the most diehard Atlantic Coast Conference fans amongst us, especially this year, but historically speaking. Now, I think if you go back to like the early to mid 90s, internet bump just a second ago. Am I still with you, Lonzo?
Yeah, you're still on
Okay,
the
perfect.
air, and
All right, just making sure.
the stream is just me, but I fixed it to where they're hearing you too.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
Until
Just
you
wanted
get
to make
back.
sure. Okay, that's fine. I am good with that. So, yeah, so this was 1,011%. Just Rhett Lashley trying to shine a little positive light on the Atlantic Coast Conference as a whole, and I think it's fair. Like he's part of the club. He's part of the group, and if he is part of the club and part of the group, it is obviously going to make sense in that situation that he's going to shine. So the point here was, I saw a bunch of people yesterday across the internet and across social media like, oh, what an idiot, what a moron, what a loser. And it's like, guys, he's what do you want him to do? Like, he's not going to go up there and go, hey, guys, Rhett Lashley here from SMU. We're happy to be here. Good, successful year in the football conference last year. And, one day we just hope we can hold a candle to the SEC. They're so much better than we are. We're terrible as a conference of football. It's pretty embarrassing that we're here. Like, what do you want him to say?
I took it as an underneath thing saying, we're SMU. We've been here 1 year. We're already in the championship. What if they're back again this year? Back again the year after that?
I agree with that take too. I would also, like I said, I think a lot of the SEC folks got all uppity yesterday. They were like, how dare he have the audacity to point out that every SEC title to 1964 has been won by one of 6 teams. How the audacity of him. Guys, I don't think it's necessarily kicking the legs out of the SEC. He's just here for promotions.
I did look through the Big Ten, and you can imagine what it is.
I'm assuming it's just like,
it's Ohio State and Michigan with another team sprinkled in like once every 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. Let's see. Just because I'm curious and I have the page pulled up. Dating back to 1964, since that's the mark that Rhett Lashley
I was going to say, I went all the way back to the beginning just because I was curious.
Yeah,
but
dating back to 1964, which is when Rhett Lashley brought up the example. Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Minnesota, and Purdue split it 3 ways in 1967. Ohio State, and Michigan split it in 69. Ohio State, Michigan split. 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 Michigan State split. Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State split. Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State split. Michigan State outright in 87. 88, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State, 4-way split, because that makes sense. Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin. Penn State, Northwestern, Ohio State. Michigan, Ohio. 1998, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, 3-way. Wisconsin, 2000, Michigan, Northwestern, Purdue, 3-way, all at 6-2 in conference. 2001, Illinois. I would say just back of the envelope here, when you have a couple of Illinois, a couple of Iowas, obviously dominated by Michigan, Ohio State. You go back into the 60s, you get into a handful more Michigan States, but it's kind of the same thing. There's like 4 or 5 teams that just kind of rotate through the conference championships. I was just more surprised that there was only 6. Right.
All right. So, so if you look at the ACC going back that far, at least the last decade, it's been mostly Clemson. So I don't understand his point.
I just think the point was very simply that the ACC has been a team, yes, going back to the last 10 years, it's been mostly Clemson. And then there was obviously a period of time pre-Dabo Swinney where it was mostly Florida State for a very long time. I just think the point that he was making there is that the league is that I think it was very much what Jim Phillips was trying to do, which is make the claim and make the argument that when you are looking at college football conferences, the ACC should be mentioned in the same breath as the SEC and the Big Ten. And probably very few people outside of this building believe and agree with that. I think he was just propping up the conference of which he is a member and saying, we are number 3 and we are in the back pockets of number 1 and 2. We make more than double the money of number 4. It's like we should be mentioned with 1 and 2. It should be those 2 and us, as opposed to those 2, then us in the Big 12 and everybody else.
I hope that's not Karen back there behind you. I just hope it's not. It's, okay, because she was watching you for a little bit there.
Yeah, we're about to find out.
There you go.
I am Rob Brown. Lonzo's back in the network studio. When we come back, not ACC football. 1 second. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. I got some stuff I want to say. I'm going to say it when we come back. It's the Rob Brown Show. It's the Fan Upstate.
QC.
10-4.
From the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown, you're listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local England Market Low Price.
833. That is the number to be a part of the Hub City Spartanburger text line and get your text read on the show. That is also the number to call in and be a part of the radio broadcast. A couple of other sports stories that I wanted to get to today. We are talking, obviously, mostly all college football, but there are some other conversations, I think, going on. The Braves lose 9-0 at the house last night. Average night on offense, 8 hits, but 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position. 12 games back now of 500, 13 and a half games back of the division lead. They're 4.5 games back of the Miami Marlins at this point. And we are starting to get, I should say, reports that Marcell Ozuna, the designated hitter, obviously has been sent to the Pine. He was dealing with a hip injury. He did try to play it when the team felt like the Braves may still be able to climb out of the cellar in the second half. But as they have come back from the All-Star break, they opened with a win against the Yankees, dropped the second two. They opened with a win against the San Francisco Giants 2 nights ago. They get back 9-0 last night, and now all the momentum squarely at the feet of the San Francisco Giants, who won their first game in 7 games over Atlanta last night. This team is trade deadline sellers. They have to be. The problem is you don't really have any pieces to sell outside of Marcell Ozuna. And to keep it a buck with you, I'm going to guess Ozuna's going to go for like 2 to 3 prospects. You're not going to get a big haul. You'd like to think you're going to get, guys that are inside maybe the top 10, top 15 prospects in any MLB organization. The rumor on the street right now is that it will be a trade with the San Diego Padres, who are looking to add a bat that will be ready for the playoffs after Ozuna heals up. The hope is that you'll get a couple of big-time prospects. Right now, what I'm hearing is you are looking at San Diego's number 15 and 18 prospects, 1 starting pitcher, 1 pure reliever that would go into the Atlanta farm system in return for Marcell Ozuna. I don't have an issue with it. I just don't know that he was given, before he got injured, I don't know that he was giving you the numbers that you wanted as a DH to justify keeping him on this rotation, A. And B, with what the pitching staff has become, and is becoming, you need arms. You just have to stock up the lower teams, the minor league teams, with arms, and you got to see if you can go, like we talked about a number of times yesterday, play the law of averages and eventually stumble into a guy who can be that guy for you. So I do not suspect that Marcell Ozuna will be much longer a member of the Atlanta Braves. In fact, I would not be shocked if we hear about that trade today. Remember, the trade deadline in Major League Baseball is next Thursday. It is the same day as the NFL's Hall of Fame game. Teams, if they are going to make moves, do have to make moves by that point. I suspect that is likely going to be the case for the Atlanta Braves, that we will hear a move or two. But outside of that, and this is what I've been telling you for a number of weeks, the strategy that the Braves employed of signing young guys to long contracts early can be a boon when that guy turns out to be a Ronald Acuna Jr., when that guy turns out to be, if he gets back into shape and into form. Austin Riley is on the DL. He will not be returning today. There were thoughts that Austin Riley would make his way back to the roster today. That is not going to be the case, according to Brian Snitker, which makes sense. I wouldn't want him to either. There is no sense in bringing him back. You have no postseason hopes right now. Let Austin Riley take all the time that he needs to get it right and get it back together, because you've got this guy under such a big and long contract that he is your third baseman for the foreseeable future. Let him take all the time he needs to get back to, or at least as close to 100% he can be. Outside of that, unless they want to trade one of the catchers, Sean Murphy or Drake Baldwin, there's really not any other moves to be made in this spot. And I do think that you were going to see that be the result. The Braves should be trade line sellers. They just don't have a lot to sell at this point, and that's why this is very interesting. Let's talk very briefly about the NASCAR story that is going on right now. I adore what NASCAR did earlier this week. I think it's so fantastic. Let me tell you the story. 2311 Motorsports, Front Row Motorsports, the two teams that are suing NASCAR, effectively claiming that they have a monopoly on racing and that they have created a world where they can just do whatever they want. The argument that they have made a number of times is that NASCAR has created this world where they can effectively change the rules of their sport whenever they want to, however they want to, and nobody can do anything about it. They believe that there is a violation of antitrust laws in place there and have called that to the carpet. Well, as a response to that a number of months ago, NASCAR officially said, all right, well, you're not getting your charters updated and renewed. Those charters were set to expire today. And when those charters expired, NASCAR would retain the right to sell those charters, meaning that for 2311 Motorsports and for Front Row Motorsports to continue racing this year, those two organizations would have to race their way in every single week. Well, yesterday it was announced that NASCAR had changed a rule on the books. NASCAR had changed a rule on the books, and the change that they made said that they would, from this point forward, limit race entries to 40 teams with open teams based on owner standings. So this is very interesting because with the owner standings that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports have, they will not have to race their way in week after week. So this is very beneficial to 2311 and Front Row because it allows them to continue to race on a regular schedule without having to qualify and race their way in every week. It allows them to continue to race even if those charters aren't there. That's fantastic news for them. What's interesting about it is, in order to make that situation a reality, what did NASCAR do? They literally, in the middle of the season, unilaterally went in and changed the rule. They did the thing that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports are suing them because they've given themselves the right to do. The argument in the lawsuit is quite literally, NASCAR has opened a door that allows them to do anything they want to do, to change any rules at all, at any point, hands down, no questions asked. That's what the lawsuit is literally about. And the response to that by NASCAR is to go in and literally change the rules in the midseason however they wanted to. It is exactly what the lawsuit is accusing them of. It's my favorite thing ever because they did these two entities, these two teams, a favor by adjusting the rules so that they could keep racing even if NASCAR does pull the charters because of the lawsuit. They still get to race. They still get to compete. They don't have to race their way in. They can just use their owner points exemption to get in every week. But in order to make that happen, as basically an olive branch to these two race teams so that they would, keep racing and hopefully it'll be a little bit easier down the line to come to a settlement. In order to make that happen for these two teams, NASCAR had to quite literally do the thing that they are getting sued for doing. I don't have a take. I don't have a legal opinion. I don't have a thought. All I have for you is that's freaking hilarious, dude. It is hysterical that in order to try to extend an olive branch to 2311 and Front Row, NASCAR did the thing that 2311 and Front Row are suing them for doing, like making their point for them while the lawsuit's happening. That is beyond spectacular. I read that yesterday and I'm like, am I missing something here? Is this real life? And it turns out that it very much is. Over to Carolina Panthers, who are in training camp. They have cut linebacker Josey Jewell, no longer with the team. Josey Jewell was continuing to rehab from some concussion issues that he suffered last year. This one feels like a big move, and it's not necessarily because Josey Jewell was a stalwart or primary feature of that defense last year. This one is interesting because, A, there's not a ton of linebacker depth for the Carolina Panthers right now. There's just not a lot of linebacker depth right now. And B, there are few linebackers worth anything out there on free agency right now. Linebackers got snapped up in free agency. I mean, quick, snapped up in free agency. So the Carolina Panthers reached the spot where they went, all right, Josie Jewell's still recovering from the concussion. This ain't it. He's unfortunately, we don't think we can rely. We don't think he's going to be a dude that's going to be able to get it done. So we're just going to go ahead and cut bait and move on. Except for, what are they moving on to? Like, where is Carolina going to go? We'll talk to Rashad Beard of the Panther Nation podcast coming up on Friday morning, and we'll get his thoughts on this. But this felt like a move that, in terms of what the player was, like, Josie Jewell is a good linebacker. He's far from a great one. It feels like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But when you look at the perspective of what was the team's or one of the team's weak points last year, defending the run. They were one of the bottom teams in the league. It was one of the few spots last year that was very evidently and clearly a weak spot. They could not stop the run last year. You just cut a run stop linebacker. And when I went and looked at the free agent market, because I said, okay, this has got to be a move for move, right? Like, this has got to be a spot where they're cutting a guy because they got another guy that they're bringing in. I went and looked at the linebacker free agency charts. There is not much on there at all. It is slim pickings, as the old expression goes. I don't know what this team's going to do at linebacker. Like, at this point, I'm thinking they may have to make a move, make a trade for a run stop linebacker, because they are running out of them and there aren't any to go get right now off the market. So that feels like a big move. It's one that I think is going to slip under the radar for a lot of Panther fans. You're going to go, all right, the guy was banged up, he was hurt, he couldn't contribute a whole lot. I get it, I understand it, but man, I don't know what you're going to do with that spot. We'll talk to Rashad Beard on Friday morning. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll give you some final thoughts as we prepare to embark on day 2 of ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Rob Brown Show is live at ACC Media Days, presented by our friends at Ingles Markets. It's the Fan Upstate.
From the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown, you're listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
Only on the Fan Upstate.
Presented by Progressive.
Brown, the great one Lonzo, and you, running you through 3 days of live programming here at ACC Media Days, courtesy of our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. Thanks to Ingles for being a spectacular corporate partner and sponsor of our, what are we at, 9? Nope, sorry, I'm real bad at math. 4 + 3, 7, Rob. 7 days of college football coverage. 4 at the SEC Media Days last week, 3 here in Charlotte, North Carolina at ACC Media Days. Got a couple more clips from yesterday from Jim Phillips that I wanted to play for you and respond to. Let's start with this one. We talked earlier in the show about the thought, the belief that from Rhett Lashley, Congress was going to have to get involved in order for there to end up with some sort of national standard that everybody could jump in on, some sort of national standard on college sports as a whole. What would need to happen in order for there to be a standard that goes across the entire college sports landscape that could kind of shape what's going to happen? Well, I have 2 clips here from Jim Phillips. The first is a reaction to the House settlement and what he thinks needs to take place moving forward for college sports to thrive and or survive.
As you know, after years of uncertainty and legal challenges, the formal approval of the settlement in June was a major step forward in modernizing college athletics. The new system provides a sustainable framework that allows more benefits to student athletes while continuing the broad-based programming that produced so many Olympic medalists last summer. The ability for schools to provide scholarships to more student athletes does not get the positive attention it deserves. From the very beginning and throughout the negotiations, anticipated resolution, preparations for approval, and now to full implementation, the ACC has been at the forefront of these discussions. The College Sports Commission, with Brian Seeley as its CEO, has already begun its tireless work ensuring compliance with the new rules around revenue sharing, student-athlete NIL deals, and roster limits. As we move forward and continue to meet this true reset moment, we must remember that everything will not be perfect immediately. We know we must get this right, which we take very seriously. We're being thoughtful about every detail and are committed to progress through learning, adapting, and strengthening the model to support and protect college sports for generations to come. And the obligation to get this right is one the entire industry shares, from me and my fellow commissioners to university presidents, athletic directors, and coaches. We have to commit to structure, exercise restraint, and be intentional about resetting the culture of college athletics. Without question, there's still significant work to be done, but we must acknowledge that collectively we are truly in a better place, and we have a responsibility to make it work in the future.
So Jim Phillips says, look, there's a lot we've got to get done. The House settlement opens some doors, but we've got to be careful about how we move forward. But just seconds after that, he made a statement similar to Rhett Lashley's.
With that said, we also need Congress to act. We will continue to push for federal legislation that will support our efforts to ensure a uniform, stable, and legally sound future. Recently, a bipartisan group of Congress members sponsored the SCORE Act, designed to address issues that threaten college sports, but cannot be solved in the legal settlement in June. Creating a national standard, as opposed to state-by-state differences, codifies the student-athlete's right to earn money for their NIL and is paramount importance in ensuring that all institutions are operating under the same law. The act also clarifies rulemaking authority around the central tenets important for the continued integration of college sports in the higher education setting. As an example of the threats the system faces, college sports cannot withstand repeated one-off legal challenges to eligibility rules that further separate athletic participation from the institutional academic mission. Not only is it philosophically contrary to the educational mission of our institutions, but continued extensions of eligibility threaten the opportunities for the next generation of college student athletes. As you know, there are many issues addressed in this comprehensive bill, and I applaud the engagement of our national leaders and look forward to our continued progress.
So he hypes the SCORE Act, which I started reading through yesterday. I actually need to circle back around. I would like to spend some time today and finish kind of diving into that to see really what and where the ramifications are, what matters, how it's going to play into this whole thing, et cetera, because I am very intrigued about what is the shape that this could take down the line. But the one thing that I thought was interesting that he called out was the continued extension of eligibility, because we had the COVID year, and that was kind of a one-off, and now we're talking about 11 guys who play a couple of years at JUCO ball to retain all of their regular eligibility once they get into FBS and FCS ball, which means that guys could be playing for 6, 7, 8+ years down the line. I thought it's interesting that he specifically called that out. We know the lawsuit that has taken place around Diego Pavia that would allow him another year of eligibility. There are plenty more. Rasul Faishan at South Carolina is kind of in that same boat of will the NCAA grant him his waiver to play, et cetera, et cetera. I thought him calling all of that out specifically with that instance was a very interesting setup as well. So, Jim Phillips saying the same thing Rhett Lashley said, which is Congress is going to have to get involved to create a national standard. But a bunch of states are going to push back, as they have already started to. Jim Phillips also got asked if the SEC does decide to go to a 9-game conference schedule, would the ACC follow suit?
We have discussed 9. We've discussed 9 several times in my 5 years as commissioner. The group has always felt that at the end of the day, those non-conference games have really been good for the league, and we have really scheduled well. So it isn't as if our league has just kind of looked aside about strength of schedule. They have. If you go to 9, if the SEC ends up going to 9 and maybe we end up going to 9, I think there's a few challenges. Those rivalry games that we really enjoy, I think that the fans really enjoy, I think some of those go away. And it now focuses more on everybody's conference schedule than it is a mix of conference schedule and non-conference. Also, I think it's a challenge for us with an odd number of schools at 17 and how you exactly work that out. So that in itself, there's some difficulty there. And I continue to talk to Greg, and I talk to Tony and Brett all the time. I mean, we have frequent conversations. So, I mean, no one's kind of moving in a vacuum on this. We're exchanging, thoughts there, and we'll see. At the end of the day, I like where our league is. I like where we're at in 8 games, because we're playing the type of caliber that I described, 26 really good non-conference games. But we'll adjust if we have to, and I think all of this remains a work in progress.
Yeah, I think that last sentence is kind of like the motto of college football in 2025, isn't it? All of this is just a work in progress. It is. And again, he mentioned the challenge of creating a 9-game scenario when you have an odd number of teams. It basically comes down to, as a lot of this will for the ACC, a lot of it is going to come down to, we're going to see what the SEC and Big Ten do, and we're going to see what we can do in response to what the SEC and the Big Ten do that allows us to exist, that allows us to keep flourishing, that allows us to keep participating, to exist when it's all said and done. This is why I said earlier, when he got asked about, do you prefer 5+11? Do you prefer 4-4-2-2, 1-1-3? What's your landing spot? Jim Phillips was kind of mum on the topic, right? Like, he gave a little bit, but really nothing. And my takeaway from that was he's probably hanging on to that as a bargaining chip, because if the SEC can't gain ground, if the Big Ten can't gain ground, or maybe if one of them loses a little ground, the ACC could call up the other and go, look, we'll be team whatever team you are, but in order for us to be team whatever team you are, we need this. We need a concession. We need a bonus. We need a this. We need a guarantee. We need a that, whatever. use it as a bargaining chip against the big conference. My bet is that is how that's going to play out.
And now, the Rob Brown Show presents Twitter.
All right, time to take a look and see what is Xing today. First thing is Ozzy Osbourne.
Ozzy Osbourne passing away. If you have not gotten a chance to circle back around and listen to that tribute concert around Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath a few days ago, I suggest you do. Not only is it just one of the best recorded concerts I've ever seen, Zoe, I hate to acknowledge it. I was with a buddy of mine, drummer in my band last night. I was hanging out with last night. He lives up this way, and we got to talking about it. And, man, that final version of Mama, I'm Coming Home slapped me in the face emotionally last night when we went back and watched it again. I believe Diesel described him as the well from which all darkness springs, and that is the best compliment I could give to Ozzy Osbourne. What a legend.
Wow. What a quote.
Hey, man,
I mean,
the Prince of Darkness. Like, those of us that found our way, then there were all sorts of paths that led you there. But those of us that found our way into the world of black metal, dark metal, death metal, all of us, we can all be from different spots. Diesel and I both love metal. We both have very different styles and taste of the metal that we love. No matter the style and taste of the heavy metal, the dark metal, the death metal that you love, there is only one artist that is in common with all of them, and it was Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath.
I mean, even people who say they don't like Ozzy Osbourne, you've heard Crazy Train 10,000 times.
Without a doubt.
All right, the next thing it's Xing is hashtag earworm.
Well, an earworm, obviously, is the common vernacular to describe a song that gets stuck in your head that you cannot get rid of when it gets stuck in your head. The problem is that for people like me with extreme ADHD, every song's an earworm, and I can have like 4 of them in there fighting for a or you hate him, and there ain't no in between. I actually really do like Joe Buck. I do not know why Joe Buck is trending. I'm going to assume, because I don't know why he's trending, that it's a birthday.
All right, no, there is no specific reason that I can find other than a lot of people hate Joe Buck.
A lot of people
and
do hate Joe Buck.
He trends every once in a while just so people can revel in the fact that they hate him.
Yeah, people love to dunk on Joe Buck, which, again, like I like Joe Buck. I'm not going to say he's on my like Mount Rushmore of play-by-play guys, but I also think, especially in baseball, I think Joe Buck is one of the most solid, consistent guys that has ever been in that spot. Like, I think he's very good at the gig. By the way, if I gave you a stab in the dark at Joe Buck's age, what would you say?
43.
He is 56.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Same age as me.
Yeah.
Man, I feel bad about myself. All right, the last thing that's Xing is Aquaman.
Aquaman. I do not know why Aquaman is Xing.
All right, let me tell you really quick because
Yes,
we're running
please
out of time. All right, some influencer has named her kids Malibu Barbie, Elvis, and now Aquaman. Those poor children.
You know, I have been a long-standing proponent of, like, you cannot, in the United States of America, create a world where people must, like, perform and pass some sort of test before they're allowed to have children. And every day I challenge that belief. No, every day y'all challenge that belief. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thank you for being here. Day 2 of ACC Media Days. Well, it's in the books in terms of the show. I'll be here for the next, let's call it 7-8 hours. We'll come back tomorrow, wrap it up with Day 3. We'll play all the audio from today, get you set for Day 3. Whew. Thanks for being here, people. My name is Rob Brown, The Rob Brown Show, live at ACC Media Days, presented by Ingles. See you tomorrow. It's the Fan Upstate. Later.
The Rich Eisen Show, today at noon, only on the Fan.
All right, I'm going to go get set up for old Mikey Norvell, so I'm going to pop out. He starts now.
Hey, bills
Okay,
happen.
see ya.
So
See ya,
when
thank
you
you.
need extra cash fast, go to billshappen.com. Have you been turned down? Are your credit cards maxed out?